and 40 minutes later she is signing a consent form for a 2.4 lakh rupee package. The patients who buy are never the ones who ask the most questions. The driver is shamed. You're not selling a treatment or a product, you are selling a change in how someone experiences themselves, and that is the only insight that matters about why people buy. Thursday afternoon, 2:40 p.m. in a dermatology clinic in South Delhi, a woman in her mid-40s is sitting across from the doctor. She came in for a basic chemical peel. The budget was maybe 8,000 rupees, and 40 minutes later, she is signing a consent form for a 2.4 lakh rupee package. She's not pressurized, she's not tricked, she is happy. And I'm watching from the sidelines. I was taking notes because I have seen this exact moment play out 100 times and I finally understood what just happens. My name is Hirsch and I run a consulting and performance marketing company working specifically for aesthetic clinics. I run multiple other companies as well, and that is the clean version. The actual version is I have sat in 5,000 plus patient consultations. I have watched patients spend 2 lakhs on treatments that they almost walked out of. I have watched patients abandon clinics when they were going to spend 50,000 with them that particular day. I have filled notebooks trying to understand why this was happening. And this is not philosophy. This is not theory borrowed from books. This is what I've watched happen in real time across years with real money in rooms you've probably never even stepped into. And here is what most people get wrong about buying decisions. They think neuroscience explains choice. It doesn't. It explains why that choice feels inevitable. Now let's talk about the moment that changes everything. Let me describe that moment. A woman decided to buy the 2.4 lakh rupee package. It was not when the doctor was talking about the technology. It was not when she saw the before after photos. It was not when the doctor used the word transformational. It was the moment she went silent. The patients who buy are never the ones who ask the most questions. The patients who buy are the one who go quiet at the specific moments. Let me tell you what that moment is and why it matters. The doctor had finished explaining the basic treatment options. The woman nodded, and then the doctor said, I'm also thinking something else for you. And then the doctor did something very smart. He stopped talking and held the silence. He tilted the chair slightly towards her and waited. In that silence, the woman's brain did something the doctor was counting on. She filled the gap. Her mind went, what is he thinking? What does he see that I can't? What does he know about me that even I don't know about myself? That is not a sales tactic. This is neuroscience. Your brain is built to resolve these ambiguities. When you're unsure, the brain generates story to make sense. The woman who is now writing the own narrative about what the doctor could see, and that was far more persuasive than the doctor could have ever told her. And this is also why most clinics fail at conversion. They talk too much. They try to fill in the silences. They try to rush to convince the prospect. And in doing so, they rob the patients of the experience of convincing themselves. Now, let's talk about what I see when patients walk in. I want to tell you that I've actually learned how people decide whether to buy expensive treatments or not. Not from, reading Cialdini's books, not from Harvard Business Reviews, but from sitting in clinic waiting rooms. When a patient walks into a consult room, two decisions have already been made before the doctor even says a single word. First, is this person trustworthy? Not is this person competent, trustworthy. There is a difference. A patient will buy an average result from someone they trust over an exceptional result from someone they don't trust. I have watched this happen multiple times. A clinic owner once told me that his patient came back for a second treatment even though the first one didn't work. The competitor across the street has a better reputation, but still the patient came back to them. And then I asked why, and she said, I never made her feel stupid for not knowing what I was talking about. He just explained things. There was no showing off. Second, does this person understand? Not can this person fix my problem, but do they understand why my problem matters to me? And this is the invisible filter. A patient can walk in with acne scars and leave without treatment because the doctor talked about scars in a way that made her feel somehow exposed rather than seen. Or she can walk in the same building, buy a much more expensive package because the doctor mentioned something specific. Something like, I noticed you always, flinch your cheek when you talk. This tells me that, the scar bothers more than you're saying, right? It's about seeing someone, and that is what makes someone buy. I know this sounds soft. You're running a clinic and not a therapy practice, but here is the thing that pisses people off. The clinic owners who are winning right now are not the one with the best technology. They are the ones who understand that aesthetic medicine is not about fixing a flaw. It is about making someone feel less alone in their insecurities. And the patients who feel understood will follow you anywhere. They'll spend money that they don't have. They'll recommend you to their friends. Now let's talk about the two-question test. I have developed a pattern. It's not perfect, but I can tell within 90 seconds whether a patient is going to convert or walk out. I use two questions, and these are not the ones that you think. The first question is something like, what would happen if you do nothing? This answer tells me everything. If the patient says something clinical like scars would stay the same or the hair would not grow back, the patient is in information gathering mode. They are shopping. They might convert, but they'll be very price sensitive. They'll compare and they'll wait. But if the patient pauses and says something like, I would feel the same way that I feel right now every time I look in the mirror, my husband would keep asking me why I'm not doing anything about my weight, or I would hate myself for being like this every year. And if the answer is something like this, the patient is a close. They've already moved past the problem and they're already thinking about the cost of not solving it. And that is where patient conversion lives. The second question I watch for is when the doctor mentions the price and the patient's response is, that is expensive. Patient's response is not, that is expensive, but if it's, can I afford that, or how do people usually pay for this? This is critical. That is expensive is a judgment, but can I afford that is a question about possibility. One patient is negotiating while the other patient is problem solving to say yes. Now I've learned to listen for that shift, because when the patient moves from defending the problem to defending the investment, the sale is made. The doctor is just for formality at that point. Now, here is something clinic owners will not believe until they test it themselves. The physical setup of a consultation room will change your conversion rate more than your sales pitch. I watched a clinic increase their conversions by 18% just by moving the patient chair by 6 inches. Now, let me explain. In most clinics, the doctor sits behind the desk and the patient sits in front, right? This is a barrier. And it is also ancestral. It is the position for authority, the position that says, I have the knowledge and you need the knowledge, so come to me. And yes, that is somewhat true as well, but it also says I'm different from you, I'm separate. The clinic that moved the chair moved it to a 45-degree angle to the desk, not facing the doctor directly and not facing away either. In this position, the patient is not being interrogated or lectured, they are being consulted. The doctor can still make notes, but something shifts in the power dynamic. The second thing is what is there on the desk. Most clinics have computer, papers, some hard instruments, but the patients who converted the most were in clinics where the doctor had something else entirely, a mirror or anything to show them with their current situation. The doctor should reference that as a tool of conversation. Here's what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? This sounds small, but it changes everything because it now says your perspective matters. I'm not telling you what's wrong. I'm trying to explore and find out with you. And the third thing nobody talks about is where the light is coming from. Clinics lit from above with hard fluorescence have lower conversion rates than clinics with light sources at eye level. Why? Because hard shadows make people look worse. Your patient walks in. She sees herself reflected in every shiny surface, and her insecurity just got validated by science. I watched one clinic install softer side lighting, and the consultation room started to feel less clinical and more like a conversation. That changed conversions more than changing the script. And this is not interior designing, this is architecture of trust. And trust is what you're really selling. Now, let's talk about something that nobody wants to admit. This is something clinic owners hate hearing anywhere. In Indian aesthetic medicine, status is not the primary buyer. That is what the books say. That is what the agencies try to sell. Status is nice to have, yes, but it is not the driver. The driver is shame. Not the kind of shame that is pathological or needs therapy, but the kind of shame that is intimate and private. The shame of a woman who sees her skin change and feels like she's losing something. The shame of a man losing his hair and feeling less like himself. The shame of someone who thinks that wanting to look better means there is something wrong with them as a person. I have watched affluent patients turn down luxury treatments because they did not want to admit they needed them. I have watched other patients from far more modest backgrounds spend money that they didn't even have because they just could not stand the alternative. The wealth did not matter, the shame did. And here is the part that matters. The clinics that acknowledge the shame, not by being sympathetic, but by being matter of fact about it, are the ones that convert. A doctor who says most women your age are thinking about this gives the patient permission to want what she wants without the internal story that wanting it makes her shallow. That one sentence changes whether someone buy. The clinics that lose conversions are the ones that trying to reframe it as positive or empowering. Something like you're investing in yourself or doing this for yourself. That actually makes it worse because now the patient is adding another layer, guilt about being selfish. Instead, the most effective clinics just say, you do not like how you look. That is okay. Well, let me show you what is possible and what can change. Simple and direct. No false empowerment, just understanding. Now let's talk about the patient who almost bought. Let me tell you about that very specific patient. The person was about 28, 27, came in for a consultation for an under eye treatment. Budget was probably 15,000 rupee for the basic procedure. The doctor ran through the options. The patient said that he likes the idea. The doctor was already drawing up the consent papers, and then something happened. The doctor asked one more question. So, what made you finally decide to come in now? The patient hesitated. She said, my boyfriend said he liked my face the way it is. He was just being nice, but it made me feel like if I do this, like I'm not listening to him, like, am I being a vain person? And here is where most doctors, go wrong. They double down on empowerment. This is about you, not about him. Wrong move. The patient now feels judged about caring about her boyfriend. The doctor in this case did something different. She paused and then she said, I get it. Here's the thing though. You're not doing this because you said something negative. You're doing this because you noticed something and you're trying to explore it further, right? You can like your face as it is, but you can also decide if you like it differently, na? Both things are true, right? That is not sales language, that is permission language. The patient bought that day, not just the basic package, but she bought the larger package and she said yes to a follow up treatment in another 6 months. So that day, the patient became a believer. Why? Because the doctor gave her something more valuable than a procedure. She gave her a story about herself that she could now live with. Now, let's talk about what your brain is actually doing. You're being told that people make decisions with emotion and justify with logic, right? That is true, yes, but it's not completely true. Your brain is not one brain, it has three brains stacked on top of each other. All three are fighting for control, and the one that wins is almost never the one that you think. The bottom brain or the reptile brain is running base level survival and threat detection. In the consultation room, this brain is asking, is this safe? Can I trust this person? Will this hurt? The middle brain then is the limbic system. This is running emotion and meaning making. Does this matter to me? Does this connect to something I care about? Do I feel seen? And then the top brain, the prefrontal cortex, is running logic and justification. Can I afford this? Does this make sense? What would people think? Now, most sales training teaches you to win the top brain, and that is why it fails. The top brain is the last one to decide. It is the justification machine of the decision that the other two brains have already taken, and then they try to make it sound reasonable. In that clinic in South Delhi, the woman who bought the 2.4 lakh package, her reptile brain decided that the doctor was safe because she was calm, because the clinic was clean, because the patient seemed happy. Her limbic brain then decided she was seen because the doctor acknowledged her insecurities and there was no judgment. And finally, her prefrontal cortex was now tasked with the easy job. How do I pay for this? Now, most clinics are fighting the wrong brain. They are sending information to the top brain. They are sending before after photos, credentials, where the decision has already been made in the bottom two brains. Now, here is what I want you to understand. If you're running a clinic or running any business, you're not selling a treatment or a product. You are selling a change in how someone experiences themselves. In that change begins the moment they sit down. Before you say anything, it changes based on whether they feel safe and seen. The clinics that are winning right now are not winning because they have better technology or better marketing. They are winning because they have figured out how to make someone feel less alone in their vulnerability. The consultations that convert are the ones where patients leave having told the doctor something they didn't even plan to say, where a moment of silence becomes a moment of certainty, where a question about status or price or logistics becomes a question about what is possible. And this is not manipulative. This is not even that sophisticated. It is just what happens when you stop treating buying as a transaction, start treating it as a conversation between a person who wants something and the person who understands why that matter. The woman in South Delhi did not buy because she was strict or pressured. She bought because she walked into a room and someone understood what she was afraid to admit. Someone finally made her believe that fixing it was possible. That is not psychology. That is not just neuroscience. That is what happens when someone finally feels understood. And that is the only insight that matters about why people buy. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you liked it, share it with someone who might find this valuable. Subscribe to the channel, and I'm going to see you in the next one.